I'm, in my day job, I'm an economist and a policy expert, and have been involved in policy and diplomacy, and have worked with more than 100 governments around the world for more than 45 years. So I'm looking for solutions, what to do. It should be understood in that. Now, in practical terms, I see the following. I work at the UN every day. I speak with dozens of ambassadors probably every month, at least to say hello, to chat. I would say 180 of the 193 UN member states support a two-state solution. Uh, this is very good because it's part of international law. It's part of the International Court of Justice ruling last year. It was just declared the policy of the UN General Assembly on July 29th, a month ago, in a high-level session on implementing the two-state solution. There is almost unanimous backing in the world for the two-state solution. I would estimate that 95% of the world's population live in countries where their governments support the two-state solution. So the US is 4.1% of the world population. Then there's Israel, which is a tiny sliver. And then there's, by the way, Micronesia, Vanuatu, Nauru, Papua New Guinea, and the only two countries that aren't microscopic left are Paraguay and Argentina under Milei. Okay, this is tiny. The overwhelming will of the world is for a state of Palestine now. My argument is that Israel's government is completely delusional and genocidal, by the way. That's part of the delusions. And Israel, of course, will never agree to this. So I'm not talking about an Oslo process or the final stage of negotiations or something negotiated. I want it to be imposed on Israel, pure and simple. Now, under the UN Charter, it can be imposed on Israel by the UN Security Council. Just one fly in the ointment, which is the United States government, which vetoes this. Mm-hmm. The rest of the world favors it. So, yes, in practical terms, I'm trying to change the US government position. And I have three things on my side. One, it's the right thing to do. What's happening now is not in the US interest at all. Phony. Yes, it's in the interest maybe of the Zionist lobby, but it is not in the interest of the American people. It doesn't benefit us in security terms, in moral terms, in economic terms, nothing. Mm-hmm. So it's totally antithetical to US interests to be complicit in Israel's genocide. That's number one. Second, the entire world, as I've said, other than that handful of tiny places and a couple not quite microscopic places and the US are against Israel's position and are in favor of the two-state solution. So that is a second very practical point that the US can be really helped to understand that we're completely isolated. If the US thinks that its future lies with Israel and Vanuatu and Nauru against the rest of the world, well, I don't think that makes much sense. Then the third point, very important, is the American people, who aren't asked very much about this, are sick of this. It's still true that when the gap is so wide between the politicians, who are pretty pathetic, let's be clear, and the American public, there's at least a tension because we have a semblance of democracy in the United States.
Wouldn't there be people who say Israel's on a roll here? They're negotiating right now with Syria. to solidify ties with the new Syrian regime. They're seeking help to help Lebanon to root out Hezbollah in southern Lebanon. They just carried out a major strike on Yemen's infrastructure yesterday. And in fact, Israel Katz, the defense minister, said that the plague of the firstborn may be struck down on Yemen over its attacks in defense of the Palestinians. Would there be an argument that Israel, like other than statements, strongly worded statements from, let's say, the German foreign ministry, doesn't Israel seem to be on a bit of a winning streak, at least on the battlefield? And could someone make a rational argument that they're on a roll?
I don't know. Just the other day, Hamas had an 18-man unit emerge from the ground, attacking Israeli convoys, slaughtering the Israelis there, then turning their attention on an Israeli-occupied building, going in and shooting. Yes, they took casualties, but they hurt the Israelis a lot. Every day, Israelis are dying. Israeli soldiers are dying in Gaza. There's the reality that there's nothing Israel can do to win this battle sinks home. I don't call that on a roll. Hundreds of thousands of Israelis were in the streets condemning Benjamin Netanyahu, his policies. I don't call that on a roll. Benjamin Netanyahu is under pressure from domestic courts that are seeking to hold him accountable for his actions, including lying to the Israeli people, violations of Israel's security, and perhaps more importantly or more effectively, the corruption that he's clearly guilty of. And, if the courts have their way, he'll be found guilty and removed. That's not on a roll. Egypt mobilized 40,000 troops and moved them into an area in northern Sinai, which Egyptian troops aren't supposed to be. This is a direct response to Israel's ongoing genocide in Gaza. That's not on a roll. Saudi Arabia has spoken about the need for the Arab nations to come up with deterrence against Israel. That's not on a roll. Iran has fired new ballistic missiles that not only can penetrate Israel's ballistic missile defense shield, but when hitting the ground will increase by orders of magnitude the damage done to Israeli targets. That's not on a roll. The United Nations has condemned. Germany has stopped sales. Nations are talking about the recognition of Palestine. That's not on a roll. So, no, I think the things you mentioned, yes, they're there, but those are superficial. Those are cosmetic. Those aren't substantive victories for Israel. Israel will always be able to bomb nations. Bombing Yemen doesn't signify anything. Hezbollah, it's not a done deal yet. I mean, the Lebanese government's always been talking about the necessity of disarming Hezbollah. Turning that into reality is different. And negotiating with al-Qaeda can never be seen as a victory, even for a nation with such low standards as Israel. So, no, I don't see these as positives for Israel. I think it's actually, when you look at it more closely, it's a manifestation of just how low Israel has sunk, and how poorly positioned Israel is in terms of global geopolitics.
The difference of where we are today and a state of Palestine that is the 194th UN member state and recognized by essentially all the world except Israel is one vote in the UN Security Council. So just from a completely tactical, very narrow point of view, if the United States changes its vote to stop its veto on the state of Palestine membership in the UN, Palestine becomes a member state. So this is something that could happen in an hour from now. This is not a heavy lift. Then you might say, yeah, but what does that change? Israel will continue to do what it does. It will still have 600,000 settlers in the West Bank. It will, yes, of course, that is true. But what I wanted to do first is to put an end to the delusion, the murderous delusion of Smotrich, Ben-Gvir, Netanyahu, and a lot of the Israeli people that they're going to hold on to this territory forever, because they ain't. And that needs to be said at the outset, not at the end. It needs to be said irrevocably at the outset. Your borders are the 4th of June, 1967, period, according to international law, as determined once again by the International Court of Justice in 2024. Now, following that, if the U.S. changed its position, There could be the interposition of security forces under the UN Security Council. There could be sanctions against Israel. There could be a suspension of Israel in the UN itself. There could be a military suspension of any military equipment. Many things could be done to bring this to fruition. I admit, I understand fully, it depends on the United States. But my point is, it doesn't depend on changing dozens of governments. It depends on ending the complicity in genocide of the US government. And the American people get it. They get it as much as they can in our propaganda-filled world. They're 70% on board on this. So we're talking about, from my point of view, as of this morning, one vote, which puts a completely different dynamic into play. If you say, A, what's the chance? B, will it really work? C, what happens then with the settlers? This, that. Yes, I will throw up my hands like everyone else and say, this ain't easy. I'm trying to find a practical way. There are 8 million Palestinian Arabs and there are 8 million Jews in Israel, and I don't want the Jews to kill all the Palestinians. That's the way it's going right now, or to expel them. And I think the best thing is security on both sides, even if it's a wall a mile high. There should be a state of Palestine right now, immediately, and Israel should get the heck out and stop its murder. And I think we're much closer to that possibility, and that there's a very practical roadmap. Of course, we got Trump, we've got the AIPAC, we've got the Israel lobby. I understand all of that. I've lived with that all my life. But again, the only two pincers that I see is the whole world seeing what's going on right now, telling the United States, you are genocidal now. Mr. Trump, who wants his Nobel Peace Prize, Nobel Peace Prize for your genocide? Give me a break. And look at the American people. They are against what is being done in the name of the American people. It makes it at least possible to move forward. By the way, the Arab world, the Arab League, the Organization of Islamic Cooperation, which is meeting in Jeddah these days, is very, very clear. There can be demilitarization, there can be mutual security, there can be solutions that are very practical. This is not a moment, other than in Israel's behavior, of high ideology. This is actually a moment of pragmatism. Stop mass murder. And there's a lot of good thinking going on in the Arab League, in Saudi, in Egypt. I'm in touch with the diplomats. They want very practical things. Where are people in Gaza going to live? How are they going to survive? Who's going to do the rebuilding? How is the Palestinian Authority going to govern? How is Hamas going to be demilitarized or ended as a militant movement as part of the two-state solution? And I say, yes, implement the first day that Palestine is irrevocably the 194th UN member state. Then we move in a completely different direction from the utter stupidity and violence of the way that we're discussing this currently.